Okay, when you're working at home, either on a PC or a Mac, usually on a PC, there's generally a little pop-up over here that you can use to launch your apps. On the Mac, you can put them down here on the dock. You'll see the way I have mine set up at the bottom. I have a little icon for Illustrator. I can just click once and launch it. When it's open, I'll show you. I mean, there's a number of ways that you can launch applications. And some of you may already know this, and some of you may not. But I have to wait for this to launch, and then I'll close it again. And you get this dialog box, and go ahead and just go ahead and want to create a new print document. Click OK, default settings, and voila, I have a new blank sheet of paper. However, you can see I already have, this is what Adobe Illustrator, at least on the Macintosh, what the icons look like, what the files look like. And you have an extension .ai for Adobe Illustrator. If you have this file available, if you just double click on it, or you click and drag on the icon of the application, or the, I can't think of what this is called. This is the alias of the application. That too will launch it. Opens up the app. At least on the Mac. On the PC, I'm not sure what they have an equivalent of that. Anybody know? Most of you are PC users, right? Okay. Is there anything similar to that? You just click and drag it on an icon and it launches it? Or if you
I can talk.
Typically, when you open Illustrator from scratch, you see a moment ago, we saw this little window. Now I can bypass this, or I can select a brand new document, one for print, one for web, mobile device, video and film development, any number of things. Recent files that I have used are typically available over here, and I can go ahead and open from here. Or, if you want, you can just say don't show again, and then you can close it, and this is what you're left. And that's okay too. Okay. So let's start with this. We just have our tools. We don't have any paper to work on. We just have tools. Over to the left, if I click on the AI window and drag, it will allow me to pull this away and move it wherever I want on my desktop. This is probably the most important panel you'll see. This is your toolbox. And it should be apparent from any other graphics program that you may or may have used. It's pretty similar in that regard. And I will go over these in greater detail today. This is your toolbox. So for your pen tool, your text tool, for pencils, for brushes. This isn't an airbrush like you would see with a bitmap program that actually sprays symbols, control gradients and blends and things like that, an eraser tool, all that good stuff. These are all of your tools. And you can do this in a couple of different ways. If I click on this tab right here, notice instead of a single row, I see it as a double row. A slight difference, but a significant one if you have an older version of Illustrator. This is the way Illustrator tools used to be viewed. To open up more real estate, they put it in a single column, but they knew that people would be upset by that, so they gave you the option of looking at it the order. That's important to you. Put this over here. Now watch. When I select the type tool, for example, or if I select any of these, nothing happens at the moment, so let's don't worry about it. Let me close these for a minute. The one at the top will be another resource for us in a minute when we open a file. It just looks like a white solid band at the moment. But you'll notice to the right, there are a number of panels here that can be clicked and dragged off. We can also put them back, and we can reduce the real estate by doing this, by clicking and dragging on this top panel. And notice that as soon as I slide it under here, you see the blue highlight. That lets you know that it's now checked away. And when you select any one of these, it pops out. You click it, it pops out, you have access to it. And when you click it again, it hides it. So they're kind of like drawers in your desktop. When you need the item in the drawer, it's open. When you close it, click on it and close it, it's closed. Again, open up real estate so you have more space here. Okay. Now, sorry. In order to use any of these tools, just like you would in traditional media, you need a piece of paper, don't you? Or you need a canvas, you need something to draw on. So that's what we'll do from here. We'll go to either File, New, or the keystroke equivalent is Command or the Apple key. You have two of them, one on either side of your space bar, and then hit N for New. And it brings up this little dialog box. New document. So it gives us several items here that we need to pay attention to. The first one is the name of our document, which isn't so important, but it is if you leave everything untitled. Because if you just leave all of your documents untitled, you might remember today, maybe the end of this week, but next week you probably won't know. You know, what's the difference between untitled 1 and 3 and 5 and 7 and whatever? You know, you can't remember which one is which. So I'll just name this one first, Demo. Under a new document profile, and in this class we will be working in print, so that's what I'm going to use. I want the paper size to be letter size. Later on, we will probably maybe do one file or one assignment at least is tabloid. And you are free to create custom sizes as well in here. As soon as I put in a different width and height, it will create a custom size document. But these are based on traditional or standard paper sizes. You can also determine from here whether you want it portrait, which is vertical, or horizontal, which is also called landscape. At the moment, it's listing the page size in points. Points, how many people know what a point in Python is? You have a type class? Okay. Well, if you'd rather this in inches or some other unit of measurement, just check units and change it. And you notice that when we switch to inches, it's 8.5 by 11, traditional size letterhead piece of paper. So if I want a few more advanced features, I click here. And depending on what you're doing, at the moment, it's really not going to matter a whole lot to us. But later on, when you decide to print or create documents that will be printed, especially if they're printed on offset lithography, or if you're creating documents for the web, then your color mode will become very important. I'm just going to leave the default CMYK because that's typically the one that you use for print, and you'll need RGB if you're going to design for the web. You can also use RGB for print as a temporary setting, and if you only plan on using your inkjet printer to print out, because it prints CMYK usually in a not all of them, but many of them print in kind of a simulated mode. But by default, it uses CMYK. It stands for cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. So for any printed document you see, it's been printed with offset lithography. You know, something that a book, a newspaper, a magazine, CMYK, even if it's a full color ad, full color magazine, they only use 4 colors that print all of those colors. It's really kind of a Seurat painting. You know what I'm talking about? It's little dots of color. You have the perfect rosette, you have the CMYK, but for example, if you want someone to see green, how would you do that? You would put a blue dot next to a yellow dot, and the mind's eye mixes those colors. So that's how it works. If you look at any printed image, and with a magnifying glass, you'll see the little series of dots, and that's how that's done. Yeah.
If you have if you've already done your document in CMYK, can you?
Yeah, you can always switch it. Then if you plan on rasterizing anything here, and we'll talk about that in depth later, by default, Illustrator is a vector/object-oriented program. And I will demonstrate near the end of my demonstration the difference between that and bitmap or raster. Photoshop is a bitmap/raster program. Illustrator is a vector/object-oriented program. And they're very different. But if you are going to use any raster effects, or meaning if you're going to incorporate any Photoshop type images in here, it asks what resolution you want those to be. The highest, meaning for print, would be 300 pixels per inch. For screen resolution, which is what you would use for the web, it would be 72 pixels per inch. And if you're not sure, just put it in between. No, either one or the other is good. So I'll just leave it for default settings right there. I have all of this filled out, and click OK, and there we go. So what we see now, notice the top here, how it's changed. That every time I select a different tool, it changes. Every time I click on one of these tools, something changes. Some look similar, some don't. This menu bar along the top of this dot adds functionality to each of these tools, as do the palettes over here. Sometimes they will, sometimes they'll add even additional functions aside from the ones that we see here over in the tools. What you see in the middle of our desktop, defined by this black line, represents the piece of paper that we're working on. So anything that we create in Illustrator, if I want to make a star, I have a little black star here. As long as it's inside this rectangle, it will print. If it lies outside the rectangle, it will not print. It's still part of my file. This is sort of like a pasteboard out here. So if you imagine all of this as your desktop, you have your piece of paper on your desktop, but you also have things scattered around your paper you want to keep as part of your file, but you don't necessarily want it to print. You want it for later use, perhaps.
Where'd you get this rock?
Right over here. Huh? Oh, you just click and hold down the mouse. It's okay. You know, follow along with this. I just want to explain what all of these things are so that you know. And then we will get to actually using the tools. But just so you know, if you have part of your illustration and you have your star sitting like this, the part that lies outside the box will not print. The part that sits inside the box will print. But even though it lies outside the box, that doesn't mean it's not part of your documents. It is. So it does add to file size, and it can add to clutter if you're not careful. Let's look down at the bottom here, and we'll see aside from the bottom and the right, we have little scroll bars that everybody, I think, knows how to use, right? To move above the paper or below the paper. And we can use the other scroll bars to go, left or right. What I want to point out, though, which are more important, are the little buttons in the lower left-hand corner. Right now, by default, we're viewing our document at 100%. That would be the printed size. If we hold down on this, you'll notice that there are a number of other preset sizes. So if you want to zoom in using this tool, you can. If I want to look at this at 6,400%, I mean, I'm way in for the magnifying class looking at that piece of paper. Or maybe I just want to fit the screen. Another place to do that would be to go under View, and I can say fit the screen or fit in window. And now okay, so I can control the size from here. I'm going to go back down here to 100%, or I can, under View, I can control the size that I'm viewing my document as well. Because typically, when you work in computer programs, you're going to want to work in a variety of sizes. To really scrutinize details, you're going to zoom way in to make sure that things are aligned properly or created accurately. And then you'll zoom out so you get kind of a gestalt, an overall view to make sure proportions are correct and everything looks right. Does that make sense? So you're going to want to zoom in and out a lot. And that's one of the things you can do with computers you can't do in the real world. A piece of paper is what it is. It's a piece of paper. You want to look at it from a distance, you have to put it a distance away and look at it that way. Or if you want to look at close up, you look at it with a magnifying glass. So that's sort of what we're doing here. Okay? Now, there are different ways you can set up your desktop and customize them for your personal tastes or needs. Just like everyone has a particular way they organize their home, their desk, their room, their bedroom, or whatever. I mean, everybody's kitchen usually has a sink, a stove, a refrigerator, that sort of thing. But they're in different places, aren't they? The way people organize the drawers in a kitchen, they might have their silverware in one drawer and their cupboard that have glasses and another one that have dishes and things like that. And so you go into somebody else's house and you have an idea of where things are, but you're not sure, kind of grope your way around and find and say, okay, I understand the lay of the land. That's pretty much what you can do with this, just like your desk. You have, I like my pencils over here, and I like my paintbrushes here, and I like my if I'm working with watercolors over here, and I like this over there. You organize it in a certain way. Well, they make it very easy for us to organize our desktop in a way that suits our personal work habits. And to do that, you go under the window, and you'll notice under Workspace, what we can do is I can select, and I'll start with Basic. Looks similar to what I just had, but maybe a few different tools here. This is the basic organization that they have set up for us. Now, if you want some others, if I go to Window, Workspace, you'll notice that there's also a panel, which looks similar, but it's opened up. When I close it, it looks just like the other one. But by default, if I leave it this way, this is the way I prefer to work with my panels open, and my palettes open, and this is my preferred workflow. I can leave it this way. They also have a third way, since the type tool in Illustrator is very powerful. Workspace, you'll notice, is set to type, and when you open it this way, open panel looks similar, but you'll notice that the panels that are open are very different. There are a lot of them that are specific to color and character and paragraph and open type alignment, things like that. So this is all set up to work mostly with the type tool. And that is, if you've had the typography class before, I think you will really appreciate Illustrator because it has some extremely powerful tools. More powerful than any other program I have. It's more powerful than Photoshop, that's for sure, if you want to really manipulate, type, and work with it. In addition to this, we can create our own custom space. So if I go back to basic, and maybe I want to have my color palette over here. I prefer it over here. Maybe I want my panels or my swatches under here. Maybe I'll pop it under here. Maybe there's a panel that's not even available here. If I go under Window, this is typically where they are all hidden, is under the Window menu. I want my Pathfinder tool. I really like that. I'm going to put this up here. And I want these open. So maybe I should move this one up, because the Pathfinder is really important to me, so I'll move it up right here. Okay. So this is the way I like to work. I've created my own custom workspace. Now what I can do is I can go to Window, Workspace, and I can say Save Workspace. Notice I already have one. So I'm going to go ahead and Save Workspace. Perks Workspace. Number 2. You can have multiples. And now somebody comes back in and closes these or moves them around and does a variety of things, and maybe does this and does this and pushes it down here, and they messed up my desktop. And I come back in, or even I have moved it around, but I want to clean it up quickly. All I have to do is go to Window, Workspace, select Kurt's Workspace 2, and boom, it puts it back in the way I like it. So you can organize your workspace in any way, shape, or form that you like. Okay? Any questions so far? Pretty straightforward, pretty basic. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and put some of these over here. Let's start first with the difference between bitmap and vector. Okay. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use one of these basic tools over here. I'm going to use the ellipse tool, and I'm going to make 2 red circles. Side by side. And if I zoom in, and I can continue to zoom in, zoom in, zoom in, zoom in, zoom in, zoom in, you'll notice that this is just the most perfect line or edge that you've ever seen. You know, you couldn't create this more perfect. Just absolutely perfect. Look, I'm all the way up to 6,400%. That's zoomed way in. And that's just the sharpest, most crisp line you've ever seen. So I'm going to go back out. I'm going to take this one, and I'm going to convert this to a bitmap, or I'm going to, another term is to rasterize it. These shapes right now are defined by mathematics. So you can make it any size you want, you can print it any size you want, and it will always maintain a clean, accurate configuration. Because it's defined by mathematics. Right? However, in a program like Photoshop, the images that you see are defined by pixels. That's why they call it a bitmap. It's like a little grid of pixels. The more pixels you have per inch, the higher the resolution, the more refined or the more detailed the image can be. The fewer the pixels per inch, the more, what can I say, cruder it looks. So I'll take this one, I'll go under Object, and I'm going to select Rasterize, and I'm going to use just screen resolution. At this size, they look identical, don't they? But watch what happens when I zoom back in. Already you can begin to see the jaggies around here. Because this one now is defined by pixels. It's all these little squares put together that, in total, the gestalt of those little squares makes a circle. But when you zoom in, or when you print it and you enlarge it, you begin to see these. These become really pronounced. especially when you have detail in here. I don't have a solid color, so you don't see any detail, but anything with curved edges, you'll see. So that is an advantage to using vector, is that because the shapes are defined by mathematics, your file sizes are relatively small. That's really an advantage. The other thing is that you can make a teeny tiny little logo, and it can be used for a variety of things. You can shrink it down, and you can put it on a business card, and it can be a ½ inch square. Or it'll print, depending on the printer you use, it can print beautifully and look really crisp and elegant. On the other hand, maybe you want to use the same logo, that same file, because you want to put the logo on the side of painted on the side of a building that's 30 feet tall. Use the same file, different output device that will print that high, and it will be just as clean, just as crisp, just as sharp, no jaggies, because it's defined by mathematics. That's not so with bitmap or raster images. Typically, you need to know in advance what size you're going to print. And that's it. You scan it for that size, you build it for that size, and if you need it bigger later on, too bad. Because when you enlarge it, you'll see what we saw with that second circle. You begin to see lots of pixels, and that doesn't look very clean, unless that's something that you wanted. Anybody go to Starbucks? You ever notice the wallpaper they have on the side sometimes? It's very illustrative. Sometimes it has a variety of different kinds of things that will have them. I don't know, labels, I mean, it's kind of a collage of stuff that they put together. If you look at that really closely, it was all done digitally, and when they enlarged it, you can see the pixels. It's pretty crude. It looks nice from a distance, but when you look at it really close, if you want a clean, crisp image, that's because that was, when they were done with it, they had to make it, I don't know what they used to initially build it, but it had to be a bitmap or raster image, and to actually make one that big would be a huge, huge file, so they probably had to compromise, and they had to create a file that was a lower resolution and then enlarge it and then sacrifice the clarity. So, if you're thinking, well, if I can always change the scale of my images in Illustrator, why would I want to use Photoshop, or why would I use a bitmap program? The difference being is that with vector programs, you generally cannot get the same degree of detail that you can with bitmap, with Photoshop. It will look photographic or somewhat real, the images that you create in here, but they will never look exactly like a photograph. There's never that degree of detail. It's always a stylized realism. Okay? Now we'll look at samples in a moment, and you'll be able to see what you can do with Illustrator. There's some really astounding things that you can do. But that is the fundamental difference between the two. And over the years, Photoshop and Illustrator, while they were both unique in that respect, one was vector, one was raster, they have incorporated elements of both now in each of the programs. So that's why they ask, are you going to use any raster images? Are you going to use photographs in here? Are you going to convert any of your vector graphics to raster images? Maybe you'll use on the web later on. Things like that. Okay, so they've combined both. Before they were totally separate animals many, many years ago. So let's look at some samples of different kinds of illustrations you can do in Illustrator. We looked at some on Tuesday of student work, and these will be examples that are provided for you when you buy the application. So I'm going to go to File. Well, actually, I'm going to do it a different way. There is a feature in here called Bridge, and it's also available in Photoshop too, but it's actually a separate program that's launched, and it allows you to organize files and to grab files much easier than to go into File, Open, and then search for it. It's this little button right here. It says Go to Bridge. Does everybody see where I'm pointing my mouse in the upper right-hand corner? It says BR with a little magnifying glass. If I click on that, it will launch Bridge, and you'll see at the bottom, it says Bridge CS3, the little brown VR box is bouncing up and down, so you know that that's launched. That's a separate application. And you can see earlier this morning in my web class, I was looking at some Photoshop images. And when I look at them in here, without opening them, I can rename them, I can view them, I can do all sorts of stuff, add metadata to them, change parts of it. Let's do the same over here. I'm going to click over to the left, that says Favorites, and I'm going to click on Computer. I'm going to double click on a hard drive. I'm going to go inside Applications, and I want to find AI, which is Adobe Illustrator. Inside Adobe Illustrator, there's a folder called Cool Extras. Inside Cool Extras are sample files. Inside sample files is sample art, buried way down in there, huh? Now, I don't know whether you think this is easier or not, but I haven't had to open anything so far. And now I can select these, and I can see them pretty clearly, and I can use these windows and resize them. If I do this, I can look at all the metadata in here. And there's typically more metadata when you use a photograph than with this, with an image like this.
Once you go to the alternate,
How'd you get that?
How did I get to here?
Yeah.
Want me to go back?
Yeah.
Okay, let's go back to computer. Double click on computer. Think of folders like a Russian doll. John was kind enough to burn me. It should be in here. Did I put it in here? Everybody know what I'm talking about? Okay. So this is your hard drive. Inside the hard drive you have folders, and inside folders you have folders, and inside folders there may be more folders, and eventually you have the images. So here's my hard drive. Inside the hard drive is a folder called Illustrator, and inside the Illustrator folder is another folder with the images in them. So that's what we're doing. We're drilling down. We go from general to specific, which is what we're doing. So I start with the hard drive, and I know that the only reason I know where to go is because I know. If you didn't know where to go, you could be looking through all of these folders and never find it. There are other ways of doing it. That I can show you that are, if you have some general idea of the file size, there are other ways of doing searches. But I know it's inside applications because I know it's inside a folder within the Illustrator folder. So if I double click on applications, these are all the folders inside the applications folder. These are all the applications we have loaded on the hard drive. I know it's inside the Adobe Illustrator folder. So if I double click in here, now I see all the folders inside the Adobe Illustrator folder. Again, we're drilling down from general to specific. I happen to know it's inside the Cool Extras folder, and it's in sample files. And I keep double clicking, and even within that, I want to see the sample art, and here it is. Some pretty cool artwork. There are some really nice effects that you can add to make images look like neon. Now, this is really elegantly designed on top of it, but to make it look like it's glowing like neon is a very easy effect to achieve. Beautifully illustrated, elegantly shapes, elegantly proportioned, and so on. Really very nice. Has a unique style, could be used for any number of things. I presume was used for a CD cover. Squirrel nut zippers as a group. Anybody my age would know this is reminiscent from the 60s, between the Haight-Ashbury era. Peace, love, and all that stuff. So, the thing to look at here, aside from elegantly designed, two-dimensional, flat-looking shapes, is look what you can do with type in here. Really some really fun things. You can go nuts with it. All the way to the point where it gets really hard to read, and then you have to ask yourself, am I successful with it or not? Things that look a little bit more realistic. As good as this is, there's one little thing that always irks me with it. And anybody had, how many of you had drawing classes? Okay? And when you have a drawing class, they teach you about ellipses, don't they? And when you learn about ellipses, what is an ellipse? It's a circle in perspective, isn't it? Okay, these circles have points on them. Do they? There are no points on a circle. It's perfectly round. It's nice and smooth. So when I look at this ellipse up here and I see the points here, it just drives me nuts.
It's not done right. Oh,
Right.
I see that.
It's also out of perspective, too. But it's beautifully done. Don't get me wrong, because you're thinking to yourself, oh my gosh, if I did this, he'd be great. And you say, this is a horrible piece. No. It's just that when you have drawing and you know the way it's supposed to look, it drives you nuts. At least it does me.
Yeah.
But technically, it really demonstrates, I mean, he's got refraction going on here, you know, bent light with the glass. Beautiful looking marbles. I mean, everything just looks stunning in here. It is really dynamite. But where it falls apart for me is the perspective and the ellipses.
You can fix it.
It would take a bit of work, but you can. How many of you are interested in illustration? Graphic design, like brochures, packaging, stuff like that? It's a great tool for packaging. When we get to it later this semester, to design one label, and then from that, I mentioned this on Tuesday, there are some new color tools available from CS3 that you can create all the variations of this and go through lots of options very, very quickly. Very cool.
I have a question. Say, for example, is that supposed to be a business card?
No, these are Coke cans. They're basically flavored water cans. They're representations of cans of liquid.
Say, for example, if that was a business card and you had those color variations, would it be better to find paper that color or to print out that color?
Most of the time, you're going to print on white paper. If it's going to be a full color piece, and then anything on there, even when you see black on it, that's printed on there usually. It's not black paper. If that's ink. This one is done fairly realistically, and this one I think is beautifully executed. Really, really nice. Not that this one isn't either, but there are no glitches in this. This is just exquisite. It's really, really nice. This is actually easier to do than the glass with the marbles.
What's the way of the drawing? The glass with the marbles didn't look like
Wait. Yeah, okay, sorry.
the glass with the marbles didn't look like a drawing. It looked more realistic.
Right, it did. Maybe because of there's a variety of things that you can do as an artist to play tricks on the viewer. Oftentimes, if you have complementary textures, even though they aren't exactly real, by having those complements play off of one another, it will look more real, and that might be it. You have the refraction of the glass that's having an effect on you that you don't see here. This clearly looks like an illustration, not a photograph.
Yeah.
I mean, it looks too perfect for one thing. Again, the old days from my time, Ed Big Daddy Rock. But again, cool stuff with type, really, really nice. And some fun-looking kind of airbrush effects. So this is about as real as you're going to get with this stuff. This, and this. Not quite photographic. It looks clearly illustrated. And that's not a bad thing. It's just to let you know what you're in store for. This is a more contemporary use of Illustrator, where you're combining photography and illustration. And what they've done, the boy here, or the kid here, or the teen here, or the young guy here, they clearly imported a photograph and they used some auto trace tools that converted the raster image into a vector image, and then took each of the sample shapes that it converted that photo to and eliminated some of it. For example, if you look at all the facial tone or the skin tones, they just deleted them and removed it to the white of the paper. So it has a quasi-photographic look, and in some areas a nice 2D flat graphic look, a nice play off of different styles. So this has a more grunge kind of look, the way that they work with the type and stuff, very nice. And this is, this style is fairly popular right now. It's not hard to do. Again, more of an airbrush kind of a look, drop shadows and having type follow paths and stuff. Very, very nice. And it also elegantly drawn, you know, the proportions are really nice. Just all around very nice piece. This is an example of what can be done with auto trace. If you are good at drawing and you want to do something that's comic book style or close to that, that's graphic in nature, if you have a really nice clean drawing, what Illustrator can do once you scan that drawing into the computer and import it as a bitmap into Illustrator's auto trace tool can trace your drawing and make it look like it was inked. So you go from a drawing here to one that looks like it was inked, and then you can use live paint to very quickly go on and put flat color in it, and it looks like, you know, more of a comic book style, but it's something that you can do very quickly. This was available, I think, 1 or 2 versions ago when they started this. I can't remember whether it was CS2 or CS that this came out. And at first, because it is part of an old auto trace program that they have, and they just incorporated it into Illustrator, but they did make improvements. And that combined with live paint, at first I thought it was just a gimmick, a reason to upgrade. But when I saw some of the applications, it just blew me away, because I realized that anybody who is interested in comic book art and doing that for a living, just like animation, there are different areas of specialization that you can work in. There are let's see, if we're going to talk about animation, there are the people who are doing character design. Those guys are at the top of the heap, and all they do is sketch and draw on blue pencil. And so if you were to go to Walt Disney Animation, their main studios, Burbank, you could see samples of their work. And so that when they're coming up with a new feature film, and they want to know what, in Beauty and the Beast, what is the Beast going to look like? What is, you know, Belle going to look like? They need to know, because they look at any number of them. Well, they come up with the sketches, different ideas, and they'll draw it from any number of angles and stuff, all in blue pencil. And that's as far as they take it. They don't take it any farther than that. And then when it's ready to go into animation, they have the people that were the inkers and the painters. And what they would do is they would carefully trace those drawings. And with comic books, you'd have people with brushes ink. And that's where you get the nice varied line weights and stuff, and you'd carefully paint that, and then somebody else would or ink it, and then somebody else would paint in color the other. Now this can be done, what would probably take several people could be done by one person in a fraction of the time. It's just another way of eliminating drawings.
That's exactly what I was thinking.
Oh yeah, well that's what happened with Illustrator. No more drafting tools. When CAD programs came out and Illustrator, why would you need a rapidograph pen? Why would you need a ruling pen? Why would you need anything like that to draw technical drawings? Because that's what this was used for a lot, is for technical drawings. You know, if you wanted to do a plan view of something and with all the specifications to build something, and you wanted perfectly ruled lines that were exactly 1/2 point, another line that's 3-point ruled line, I mean, they're perfect. You know, absolutely perfect for like a thousandth of an inch. You know, I mean, how can you do that? Well, it's put a lot of, that's why there aren't any art stores anymore. They went away.
I don't make a lot of money either.
Photoshop put retouchers out of business. Illustrator and desktop publishing programs put type houses out of business. You don't need them anymore. Everybody's a typesetter now. You just design it and you put the type in and set the font you want and the size and tinker with it. I think there's a degradation in quality, but we kind of have learned to accept that. You know, it's typesetters really knew how to properly set the content. And now it's automated and it comes close, but no, sometimes there's some major glitches. If you're interested in maps, if we actually open this file up, we can maybe come back on another day and open a bunch up. When you zoom way in, you can see of Yellowstone. Any cartographers in here? Really beautiful, and really nice. Not necessarily something that I would think is fun, but I mean, people used to sit with ruling pens and stuff and do all this by hand. Now it's just all done in the computer. If you need to make changes, or if you make a mistake, it can be repaired very easily. So let's begin to go over some of the tools and how you use Illustrator. Sorry. In this, I would encourage you, if you'd like, to follow along with me. We're going to do more of this on Tuesday, but just to show you, because I want to, you to understand that when we're talking about an object-oriented program, what that means exactly. It means exactly that. Every element that you create in your illustration is a separate object that can be manipulated independent of everything else. And I mean just about everything. So, for example, if I want to make an ellipse, I select the ellipse tool. And if you don't see the ellipse tool, it's probably underneath the rectangle tool. So we have the star, the polygon tool. You can pick whatever shape. It doesn't have to be an ellipse. And then on your paper here, you click and drag, and as you move the mouse around, notice that you can make a different kind of ellipse. And as soon as you release, you have a shape. Everybody got that?
Yeah.
No? It's not? No.
I'm stuck on
Did you find any shape? Doesn't matter whether it's an ellipse or not. If you find the rectangle and you make a rectangle, the same thing. You can make it any size you want by clicking and dragging. And it's kind of rubber bands from that corner wherever you started. And as soon as you release, the box is fixed. But it's not permanent. As we'll see later, you can always make changes to it. You can always revise it. But that's okay. It doesn't matter. Make it any size you want. Once you're done, I'm happy with this. Maybe I want to make revisions to it, but I'm happy with it for the moment. I want to move it, I want to deselect it. Once you're done with the tool, then you need to go to the black arrow or the selection tool, and then I can click, and that allows me to deselect it. And now I can select another tool to maybe draw on here, to do something. So I can use the pencil tool, or I can use the type tool or something else. But so I think of the selection tool as sort of home base.
Okay, so you always go there after you.
Yeah, when you're done, there are other key ways or keystrokes of doing that, but you go back to this tool, click and deselect it, and now you can move on to something else. Now, if you want to select this again, because maybe I want to move it, you use the selection tool. And I click on it, and you'll notice that you see a little blue bounding box, and you see in each corner a little blue square, and you also see in the center a blue square. That lets you know that that shape is selected. And now, again, using the selection tool, I can click and drag, and I can move it wherever I want. And again, notice that you can see the line, the edge of the page underneath, but as soon as I deselect, oh, wait a minute. That's interesting. I never noticed that. Because that's not going to print on this side, so I guess it's just letting you know that whatever you put over here lies outside some of the boundaries. So clicking and dragging allows you to move. Anytime you want to delete an object, you have to select it. And then you hit the delete key, and it's gone. If you realize that was a mistake, you either go to Edit, Undo, Clear, or you can see the keyboard equivalent, which is to the right, Command to Apple Z. And that runs it down. Okay. Now, each shape you create, these are sort of like primitives that I'm using right here. Each of the tools that you see, some of them have a little dog ear in the lower right-hand corner, a little crimped or a little triangle. That indicates that there are more versions of that tool underneath. That's also true in Illustrator and InDesign, any number of Adobe products, as well as some others. These are other variations of that tool. Rather than click and hold down, if you would rather see these separate, like maybe I plan on using a number of different shapes. If I click and I hold down and I move it over to this tear off tab, and then I release, notice that this is now independent of this. This is still under here. But now I have all of these shapes at my disposal. I don't need to hold down the tab anymore. And then when I'm done creating my shapes and I don't need it anymore, I just click the red button and I close it. Now, each shape you create is comprised of, it's basically a spline curve, a Bezier curve, whatever you want to call it. And you see that it's comprised of different anchor points. And even if you do a straight line, there's always one point at the beginning and one at the end. You see these little squares here? These are anchor points. And these too can be manipulated and moved independent. And especially when we work with the pen tool, you'll see how we can use that. But one way of doing it would be to use the direct selection tool. The selection tool selects the entire object. The direct selection tool allows us to select individual anchor points. So notice that now, as soon as I click with the direct selection tool on one of the corners, it's highlighted in blue. Notice that the other three are visible too, but they are empty. They're white. So it's only the one in the upper left-hand corner that is selected. Now when I use this tool, the direct selection tool, when I click and I drag, notice that I can move it anywhere I like. And notice how I can take that shape and I can change it quite dramatically by just moving a single point. We can also find out later on that we can add points. We can also change this from a corner point to a curved point and make it curvy. We can eliminate points. We can do whatever we want. So you can manipulate, and if I'm happy with the shape and I just want to move the entire shape again, I go back to this one and I click, and now the whole shape is selected to move. So these are our selection tools. There are also selection tools down here that we'll cover next Tuesday that you can select by clicking on here. And notice you can select by color, you can select by a number of different things. This is kind of like the magic wand in Photoshop. Also the lasso tool. So for example, if I have multiple shapes, and I want to select a bunch of them, but I don't want to select all of them, I can use the lasso tool, and I can click and I can drag around these two, and notice that those two are selected and the rest are not. Or I can click and drag, so around these, so I can include this one. Notice that these three are selected. There's a bunch of different ways of selecting multiple objects, and this isn't the only way. But that's what these do. These are your selection tools. We have a pen tool that allows you to make custom shapes. And this used to be the core, the heart of Illustrator. So if I click and drag like so, and I click, I can make a curvy shape. Before you know it, something unique. It doesn't fall under any particular category. And the real challenge will be, when we get to that part of the exercises, to be able to really control this path, the pen tool, to be able to make really precise shapes. Next to that, the pen tool, we have the type tool. Very powerful. We'll get to that line tool. Click and drag to make a line. And watch what happens when I deselect. Notice the only place you can see it is here across from where it crosses the shape, because it happens to be a white path. Now, each of the shapes that you create in here have two separate properties you can control. There is the fill and the stroke. Now, even when I do this, you can't, the path is still out here, but because it's white and it matches the paper, it doesn't mean it doesn't exist, it's there. Likewise, notice with these two shapes, if I came in here and I said no stroke, you can also turn that off and I deselect, notice that they blend together. They're still separate shapes, but they blend together. So you can, there are those two properties, and you can choose whether you want to have them or not. You can also manipulate the stroke. If I go back to the stroke and I say that I want a yellow stroke, and I can come back up here and I can look at stroke. All change here. Stroke is 1 point. I'll go ahead and add it. I can keep adding, make it thicker, 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 or as thick as I want. And I can go back and change the color, I can change the thickness, I can make a broken line, all sorts of stuff. I can always come back to these shapes, and I can change, select them, and I can change, make sure that the fill color is selected, and I can change the fill.